Nau mai, haere mai ki tēnei hui o te kaunihero o ngā roto o Rotorua. Good morning everybody and welcome to this meeting of the Rotorua Lakes Council on Wednesday 22nd of April. Just a reminder to everyone that this meeting is being live streamed. Please have your mobile phones on silent and we will take our first break at 11 a.m. Also just want to apologise, it is terribly cold in this room as we convert to our new geothermal heating. Before we get underway, I'd just like to ask Councillor Patterson to open us up with the karakia with the blessing.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tūtaua mai I ronga, tūtaua mai I roro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. I don't have any apologies for this meeting. So we'll carry on. Any urgent items or minor matters? No, we will carry on, but I will just let you know that we will have a brief presentation from Andrew just regarding the fuel situation as well, so we can stay up to date. Any declarations of interest this morning? There appear to be none. So we'll confirm our minutes. These are the minutes of the Ordinary Council meetings held on the 18th of March and also the 25th of March, page 6 and 20 of your agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder? That's moved by Councillor Timura Benfell, seconded by Councillor Wang. Just checking if there are any corrections needed. No. Okay. Thank you very much. I put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. We do have a member who has arrived for the public forum. This is Madge McQuire, and I'd like to invite you, Madge, to come up to the seat, and she'll be discussing the seating plan at the eyesight today. So, Madge, welcome. You have 5 minutes if there is any time.
I haven't got my hearing aids in today. Sorry about that. Looks like an imposing group to me. I'll go straight into the story. It's about the eye centre over the road on the 2nd of March, and I remember the date because it was my 92nd birthday. I had to meet my niece who was coming up from Wellington on a bus. And it was eventually over an hour late, and it was held up by roadworks, so they couldn't forward the schedule, so I just had to wait around. It was easily the coldest and unseasonable cold day I almost experienced. It was of course, the road runs north-south. The southerly wind was coming, really strong wind, and it was raining. And there was no shelter. Although there appears to be shelter, that shelter doesn't keep the wind and rain off when it's really strong. Sitting out, it was around 5 o'clock time, maybe 4:30, but there were two people sitting at the end, huddled together, but they were getting a little bit wet. There was a lady from Tonga, elderly lady, standing at the wall, shivering. She was waiting for someone. And so I tried to find some sort of place, because of my age, to sit. And of course outside there are seats, but they were all exposed. So I went into the building and there were no seats at all. And I looked around, I thought, such a huge space, centrally heated. And then I thought maybe the cafe, but the cafe had closed. And so I just had to wait outside in the cold, and it was a very long time. And I thought, who owns this building? Well, the council do own the building. And so I think my idea is to have some seating, maybe just half a dozen, well, even 2 bench seats in that area. It's a big space. The only thing standing in there are about 5, 4, 6 maybe, freestanding containers holding brochures, but they could be moved, and it would give a total space with nothing else there. And I think some people, like the lady from Tonga, come from, thinking of tourists, come from warmer countries. There is nowhere there like a waiting room. And then apparently the buses come in up till the odd one, 9 o'clock at night. But that centre closes at 5. And in there are, I believe, I didn't go into them, really good toilets. And I think people coming in there and off those buses, maybe it would be a good idea to have that available. A warm and welcoming spot. It's maybe their first experience of Rotorua. Cost, well, always looking maybe at the minimum is maybe 2 bench seats. But if the time was extended from 5 o'clock when they normally closed that place to 7 or and I did speak to 2 different people there on 2 different days. One said they were looking at getting security for those 2 entrance doors to that area. Well, I don't know what could be done. That would be have to be looked into. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Madge. You were perfectly on time. We appreciate your feedback and wish you all the best. Thank you. Okay, so now we will go into presentations and we'll just get a brief update from Andrew regarding the fuel.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Looking at that image makes me yearn to be out of this cold chamber and down at the geothermally heated village at Ohinamutu, but we can only hope. All right, I've only got a couple of slides, councillors. I'm really happy to take questions, but if we move through it. Yeah, so as you can see, this is roughly the New Zealand government's 4-phase approach to the current fuel situation that we have. We'll just step you through what our actions are at each of these phases. Okay, so the first one, which is where we are at the moment, is really around being watchful and gathering information and preparing for subsequent phases. So what we're doing is we're monitoring fuel expenditure, we're trying to understand the impact on contracts, and we're looking at our supply chains for critical materials that are not fuel, and we're carrying out some quite detailed planning for subsequent phases. Should we get to phase 2, what we're putting into place plans for is to reduce our discretionary levels of service, analyse the impacts of those new costs landing on our approved budgets with a view to operating within those budgets, and taking some more stringent actions around protecting critical supplies for subsequent phases. I should reiterate that we have no indication from the government at this stage that we are likely to move into phase 2. So we're in phase 1. We're doing some planning for what would happen in phase 2, but I have no indications from the government that our moving to phase 2 is imminent. If we look at what might happen at phase 3, and obviously the further into the future we look, the more difficult it is to predict with precision what the circumstances will be. But our preparations are to reduce non-essential levels of service, not stop, but reduce. Again, continue to reforecast with those prices what the impact is on our budgets, and then therefore what we would adjust to stay within our budgets. Again, continue to protect critical supplies and plan for phase 4. And obviously at this stage, it's quite hard to do that with any degree of precision because we'll be operating in an external environment that's quite different to what we have now. When we get to, if we ever get to phase 4, then we'd really be following the government's lead, and we'd be looking at what the response is nationally led, and therefore we'd really be focusing on protecting essential services only, unless the circumstances are different. Very hard to talk about what might happen at that stage because we're a long way from there, and as I said, we'd have no indication that we'll get there from the government at this stage. My next slide talks about current effects. These are just some examples. This is not an exhaustive list of what we're seeing. We have seen a 40% increase in fuel costs from March last year to March this year already. We are going to operate within our budgets for this year. Certainly that's the direction and the plan. We are, as I mentioned in the previous slide, we're undertaking analysis activities for phase 2 through to 4 across all of our business units, and that is underway. We're monitoring foot traffic at some of our key customer-facing points, night market, library, aquatic centre, etc. While we're doing that, we're trying to understand if people's behaviour is changing through this, through the experience they're having of the fuel costs. Why we're doing that? Because that's, as we said, phase 1 is about being watchful, about gathering data, and about understanding how we respond in subsequent phases. So we're just gathering that information and analysing it. At this stage, we don't have any actionable information because we just haven't had enough time to pass for those data to be meaningful. We are continuing, point 4 is continuing to monitor supply levels of key products for business operations, so that's all the way through to materials that are part of our wastewater treatment process, water treatment process, cleaning supplies, spare parts, etc. And if I could conclude, and the last point I want to make today is, to date, we haven't experienced any supply challenges with any of our critical supplies for our current operations. So that's where we are at the moment. I just want to reassure you that we're monitoring things, but at this point, current operations don't have any supply problems. They certainly have pricing challenges, which we're managing. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Wang, followed by Maxwell.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Andrew, for the update. I'm just wondering, so just with that last slide there, monitoring the foot traffic, etc., is there also any monitoring done in regards to business events and conferences and such? I know we have Rotorua NZ presenting soon, but I'm just wondering if that's part of the work as well, because I'm assuming that'll have a pretty significant impact too.
Through Your Worship, so perhaps it's a question better for Rotorua NZ later, but if I go back to why we're monitoring these things, we're monitoring them so that we can be prepared for any changes coming in the future. So business events sit with Rotorua NZ, if they see some value in monitoring it to then take some action, then potentially that's what they'd look at. I'm really clear with the team where we're collecting data that's relevant rather than data that we can't act on. So perhaps a question for them, but for us that isn't something we could act on, so not a priority for Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. CEO, can you tell me how will it work for the weekly timetable for the rubbish collections? Will they remain the same through any of the stages you gave us?
So look, at the moment, as I've said on point 5, we have no disruptions to our current operations, and we have no indication that will change for our current operations as well. If you think about the 4 different phases, local government as a sector has been very clear to central government. Central government have asked for our feedback, and we've provided feedback on what we think are those absolutely essential services to be protected right down even through to phase 4, and rubbish collection is certainly included within there. We think it's absolutely vital to our community that rubbish collection continues to happen for a whole lot of human health and environmental reasons.
Thank you. Councillor Timida Benfeld, followed by Sanford and then Patterson.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship. Andrew, so are we in direct comms with the Minister responsible for the fuel crisis, or do we get our comms through Minister Watts, or like in terms of direction from the government, what's the level of separation between us and who's leading the charge?
It's a really good question. Perhaps I could cover this. LGNZ, Local Government New Zealand, which we're a member of, has frequent meetings with the fuel response group. That might not be the correct name for it, but that does have key ministers in government departments that are actively monitoring it. It's quite beneficial because not only for local councils but also regional councils, we are actively sharing information through, such as the 40% increase in fuel costs. I know public transport's been a really big one for regional councils, so they are very aware of how it's impacting councils, and also there has been strong advocacy from LGNZ to ensure that councils and the services we provide, such as waste management and also just general parks and reserves, maintaining our infrastructure is seen as essential as well. Yeah. Thank you. And there is a Zoom that LGNZ has arranged for this afternoon as well with economist Brad Olsen. So we're certainly ensuring we're well informed so we can act for our community as needed. Thank you for that question. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Andrew, for the update. Just a question on, we're in level 1 at the moment, and in level 1 we've seen a price increase of 40% from last year to this year. Are you saying that if we stay in level 1 and we stay with a price increase of 40%, that there'll be no level of service reduction?
Thank you, Councillor Sanford. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we're continuing to monitor it. There's a couple of assumptions in your question there. One is if we continue to stay at phase 1 and the price impact remains what it has been, for this financial year, I would need to, because there's still a number of months to go, I would need to consider whether, I'm not in a position to say absolutely no levels of service would change at this stage. If the price increases more than it has in the past, then the decision point about what adjustments we need to make comes closer. If the increase in costs that we've experienced turns out to be less in the future, then that decision point goes further out. At this point, we don't foresee a time imminently that we're going to have to make those decisions. We're still just trying to gather data. But if you were to ask me to commit to no levels of service change for the rest of the financial year under current circumstances, I don't have that crystal ball.
One supplementary question. So we could stay in level 1 and see a level of service reduction, possibly? Possibly.
Thank you. And I will note that diesel, any vehicles or utilities that require diesel are the key concern in terms of the cost. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Drawing on the experience that we gained from COVID, is there any likelihood, like some Southeast Asian countries have done, that we may decide that it would be appropriate for staff to work from home and only essential workers coming in?
Through Your Worship, yes, Councillor, that we've already implemented an internal policy to allow staff to do that to a certain extent. We're not at the position where we see that being mandated at all. We've just got to be conscious about what the similarities are from COVID and what they're not. So we don't have a issue with the health and safety of people being in close proximity to each other, which the circumstances were during COVID. Any action we take in that sense would be around alleviating the cost impact. And again, it's important that we stay focused on trying to deliver those levels of service, and where we can do that with hybrid ways of working, we're going to implement those.
Thank you.
And back to Councillor Temera Benfell.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Andrew, just a question, as a new councillor, it may not have been covered yet. Do we as council, I'm just thinking about this crisis and that fuel crises, energy crises and environmental crises are becoming more common, do we have a plan for potentially looking at a great acceleration of a green fleet within council to sort of combat some of the crises that are coming up? It hasn't been something that's been covered in any of the material yet, but I wonder if that's something we should potentially look at accelerating with the amounts of weather events that we're having, the amount of fuel crisis that can just happen at the drop of a hat sort of stuff. So is that something we are pushing for still? Or are we doing that?
Yeah, Councillor, thank you very much. I think later in this meeting you'll see our work programme for the year ahead. A key part of that is obviously level of service review, but our long-term plan, and that's the opportunity for us to bring in some of those potential innovations that enable us to be more resilient in the future. As I'm sure you do know, even in your time here, it's always a question of trade-offs and what we invest in, and those will be decisions for council through the course of the long-term plan. But there's certainly innovations that we're working on bringing to the table for your consideration and decision making.
Thank you. And I'll take a final question from Councillor Wing.
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. Just, I guess, following on from that question, with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, the Public Transport Committee, with this ongoing crisis with the fuel, and I guess the push to, or not really the push, but a lot of people will be moving to use public transport more. And I guess, is that something that we can provide advocacy to Regional Council on, around looking at a fare cap, or something to do with fares to help, I guess, encourage, during this crisis we could do a pretty good campaign to encourage more people to use public transport in the city. I guess that would probably be a question to the Mayor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And I do sit on that committee, and we are yet to discuss it. But I know that there's certainly been, at a national level, a lot of discussion on whether there could be subsidies provided. What we do find, though, is in other places such as Australia, where there's about a 2.5 billion in fuel subsidy so far, eventually that needs to be paid back. There are costs to run services, and we have had some strong messaging from Minister Nicola Willis around the reasons why they're not looking at reducing the road user charges, as an example. So I believe a lot of students do get heavily subsidised fees as well, but that is certainly something that we can take forward to the committee, just understanding the long-term impacts. As we have seen with the previous significant shock when we had the pandemic, although there is sometimes subsidies and financial assistance that's needed to be provided, eventually that does increase the debt which needs to be paid off in future generations. So we'll certainly take any steps into consideration on what's best in the urgent and also long term. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Andrew. As you can see, Council's role is critical in crisis because of our direct impact and work within our community, so we'll continue to monitor this carefully. And we are about to go into our annual plan and rates adoption, and the key thing will be how do we ensure that our community gets those services, such as Councillor Sandford has mentioned, without too much impact on that and without too much additional cost. So we'll move on now. We are going to go into our adoption of the annual plan and then the setting of the council rates after that. So can I just have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? It's moved by Councillor Lee, seconded by Councillor Rotorua Tate. All those in favour to receive it, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against? That's carried. Thank you. And we welcome David and also Greg to overview this report. And this is page 32 of the first agenda in your Stella.
Good morning, Your Worship. Good morning, councillors. This morning you've got in your agenda pack a draft annual plan for 2026-2027. This is the final stage in setting the budgets for the coming year, and we'll talk a little bit about the next steps when we get through this presentation. Just by way of reminder, every 3 years we set a long-term plan as a council. This is fundamentally year 3 of the previous long-term plan of 2024-2034. Through the development of this, as you will be aware, there were a number of workshops that were held from December and through to February. On the 18th of March, you've adopted the minutes this morning of the 18th of March meeting, where you made decisions on what to include in this plan. Over the last few weeks, we as a team, through the finance and corporate planning teams, have prepared this alongside the other teams in the organisation to bring forward the draft this morning.
So as a reminder, when we adopted the long-term plan for the year 2027, we had planned a rates increase of 7.9%. Through the preparation of the annual plan, there were a number of new costs that came in, and when we got together in December 2025 for our draft annual plan, we had a draft rates increase of 10.8%. We were instructed as officers to go away and revise that as best we could, and we've ended up with a annual plan for 26-27 with a rates increase of 6.8%. If we look at some of those drivers, the changes from the LTP rate of 7.9%, our environment has changed quite substantially. So, as I've mentioned before, there are a number of new wastewater treatment schemes that are now operational. The Rotorua Lakes Council that have added new costs that were not in the long-term plan. There are a number of costs associated with local water done well and our water service delivery plans, so working with the Commerce Commission and the regulator, making sure that we deliver our stormwater consents and our catchment management plans, and renewing our water consents that have added new costs that was not included in the long-term plan. We have the mathematical reality of deferring FOGO from last year to this year, which has added cost into this annual plan. And as I've mentioned before, we are coming off an environment where we've had a 5-year fixed term on our electricity pricing, and the realities of renewing that have added new cost into making sure that we can fund our electricity. We also launched an efficiency campaign across the organisation, which found $3.5 million of savings, and that was achieved through deferring some non-essential capital works, restricting some recruitment, and changing the allowances for staffing increases. Council has made the decision to transfer the night market through to Rotorua NZ. We've done some changes to user fees, and there are some other minor efficiencies. So through the journey of coming from 10.8% down to where we've landed for the annual plan, this was stage 1 in Council's response to finding those efficiencies. When we came through the Council's final proposal for items to include in the annual plan, there were an additional $2.5 million found as well. We increased the number of, we found savings in a number of additional staff vacancies. We found additional savings in staff allowances for budgets. We have included a temporary reduction in depreciation funding for our open spaces activity, and an additional inclusion into the annual plan with some funding for a level of service and fees and charges review, which we will work through through the upcoming long-term plan.
Through the annual plan 2027, councillors, you've got another report in your agenda today where we will cover these in a little more detail. But coming up over the next 12 months will be the development of the long-term plan. We'll be responding to central government reforms as they get finalised through the next 12 months. There's the inner city parking implementation from the 1st of July. We've got the FOGO implementation also starting at the beginning of the next financial year. We'll continue to progress water services planning and the local water's done well, and what the makeup of that will look like leading into the long-term plan development. The continued development of the property strategy, which will hopefully be signed off early into the new financial year, as well as the continued work on recovered water. So there's quite a comprehensive plan. We can discuss these in more detail in the next paper if that's appropriate.
Just to cover off some of the fundamentals of this annual plan, so we have an average rates increase of 6.8%. We have a capital program of 102 million, of which 35 million is funded through new debt. And when we look at what makes up that 102 million capital program, there is a very clear emphasis on looking after what we've got and being good stewards of what we currently own through our renewals, with other small increases in level of service and growth. When we look at where council's money comes from, we do have an 86% reliance on rates to fund council activities, with the balance coming through fees and charges and some operational subsidies and a minor interest and dividends. This is an area that we will look to focus on through the upcoming long-term plan. We would look at where council's money, what your money pays for. Council delivers a number of activities across the district, in the 3 orders, roading, spaces and places, and that graph there shows where the money we collect, where it's spent on the community. Although it's not currently legislation, we have been mindful to address the prospect of the central government's intentions regarding rates capping. So, as best we understand it, based on the media releases to date, that is intended to be 4% plus water, and we have demonstrated that we are committed to moving to achieving that metric. So, if we look at our 6.8% total rates increase within the annual plan that we're adopting, 4.5% is council excluding 3 waters, and the remaining 2.3 is sorry, just. If we look at the 6.8, and exclude 3 waters, we are at 4.5%. If we go one step further and reduce transport as well, we're down to 2%. So there is a very clear story that comes from this graph that our rates increases are driven through activities that deliver infrastructure. So when we remove those 3 waters and transport activities, we move from a 6.8% rates increase down to a 2% rates increase. One of the requirements of an annual plan is to illustrate how the rates increase is distributed across different segments of the community. So 6.8% is the average. The individual experiences of properties will be different depending on their capital value and the number and the types of charges they attract, depending on the sector they operate in. And what we show there is that there is a slightly lower than average increase for the business community, and around that 6.8% for the residual being farming, rural residential and the urban residential.
So, councillors, in front of you today is a recommendation to adopt the annual plan for the coming year. Following that is a paper or report on adopting the rates, and striking the rates will happen in July. So fundamentally today is approval to go ahead with this. The actual striking of the rates will only happen into the new financial year in July. So that's when rates bills would go out from our department, our finance department. Having said all of that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. We're now open for questions, and just a reminder, the attachment has the annual plan of the document in it. Councillor Timera Benfell.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship. Just before the question, I think it's great the process that we've undertaken to create the annual plan. I found all the workshops very helpful to input far before we get to this stage, which has been great. Just a question regarding the rates cap. So we're sitting under the current, because it's only a policy statement that's currently been released, no bills or anything like that. So we're currently sitting at 4.5%. It does exclude water, but it doesn't exclude transport. So the metric around transport is sort of an FYI rather than an actually contributing to the rates cap. Is that correct?
Through the Chair, that's correct. So the direction, the signal from central government is that the rates cap would come into play in future years, but there's an expectation that we demonstrate a movement towards that target. So we've shown that. The intention to show the rates increase excluding water and transport is to illustrate the nature that our rates increases are driven through those capital intensive activities. It's not on the nice to haves per se, it is really on our core services.
And just if I can just add to that, Councillor, through your worship, is there's no legislation yet, but we're just going on what the policy announcements say. The policy announcements also indicate an opportunity either for a sector-wide or a bespoke council-to-council exception to that broad range. Any such exceptions, either sector-wide or for a year or for a particular council, will be based on data. And what we've done is we've invested in systems that enable us to have that data and show that analysis. We think it's reasonable and only fair that we share that analysis with you in the community to show that we are being quite precise around our understanding our cost drivers. And both of these two activities, the reason waters is excluded and there's been strong advocacy in the sector for transport to be also included, is because councils have very little control over the costs in those two spaces. So again, just adding to the explanation of why we've shown it in the way we have.
Sorry, and just a supplementary if I can, Your Worship. So sitting at 4.5%, the 0.5% that we're currently over at the moment, a theoretical 4% cap until it's legislated. What is that representative as a number figure, as a dollar figure, that 0.5%? Is that like $500,000, or is it more than that, or is it?
Through the Chair, 0.5% would represent about 800,000 of rates.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think this might be a question actually to you and Andrew. I noticed that in the recommendation we can make, or there'll be an allowance for editorial and design changes afterwards. And I'm not going through this for the first time. There's just something in there I'm not quite sure if it's a minor editorial change or not. But is it appropriate after this meeting to bring that to you to discuss whether we make the change?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, even the Deputy Mayor has found some things where if we just change a word, it might make a bit more sense. So, mine is basically just not changing the substance of it. But what we will do is email out it afterwards with any of those minor things. And sometimes it's as simple as if there is a spelling mistake. But thank you for checking. Just check if there are any other questions. Councillor Wing, followed by Barker.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Regan David, for the presentation. So we've worked on this for quite a while now, and so this is kind of like you said, the tail end of it. But we don't strike the rates until July, as you mentioned. This might be a question for kind of that time, but I guess just preemptively, what would be the? Can you just confirm the rates rebate eligibility and the early payment discount that we do offer, and what that figure that we're working towards might be?
Through the Chair, we offer a 2% discount on early repayment of rates. That's included within the rate setting paper. The metrics for the rates, the criteria for the rates rebate is set through the Department of Internal Affairs. I don't have those quite at hand, but I can circulate those after this meeting.
And Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, team, and thank you very much for all the work that's gone into this up to date. It's been a great process to be a part of, and I know a lot of work has been expended by all the teams to get this to this point in this time frame as well. I'm just asking my question today on behalf of the farming community. Just interested in how the averages play out when we look at the rating impact. And I note that the CVs listed for farming in the document go up to $2 million. And I would hazard a guess to say that there's many properties out there in the farming community that are a lot higher value than that. Have you extrapolated the impact on those valued properties as well?
Through the chair, yes, we have. We base the value of the CVs that we include in this table on the quartiles. So we take there will be some properties that have higher CV than we do include in the table. They are not. There is not a large number of them. There'll be The rates increases for the different sectors of the community are entirely based on the types of charges they increase. So where, as we've shown through the slides, where water has increased more than other areas, if there are properties that pay water but not other charges, then they will be more heavily impacted just by the nature of the charges that they attract. There will be very few properties above the 2 million within our rating database above in the upper quartile.
Thank you. And just an observation through you, Madam Chair. There probably aren't a tremendous number of farming properties by number across our district, which probably contributes to that. But I do want to acknowledge that there are significant land holdings across the district that are in the higher quartile, or at the top end of that top quartile. And so I'd just be interested to understand the impact, if you could share that with me later on even. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll get staff to follow up on that. There appears to be no further questions, so I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Timera Benfell. What I'll do, though, is before I open up for any discussion, is just see if Andrew has any final comments.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that obviously the end of a long process, I want to acknowledge the team across the organisation that have been through this work. Obviously Greg and David have had the pleasure of fronting a lot of it, but there's a huge amount of effort that goes into the back of it. I know we've already had some discussion around the uncertain environment we live in. What I would say is that the environment's always uncertain, and we're required by legislation to make decisions based on the best information we have at the time. So based on that, we've got this annual plan in front of us. It sets some budgets, sets some targets that are very challenging, but as an organisation, we're up for it. We're going to do our very best to deliver it, and where we need to come back and talk about how the external environment is changing the services we deliver. My commitment and the team's commitment is we'll do that, bring it to the chamber, have that conversation, and be really upfront with you and the community. So that's my final comments.
Thank you. We now are open for discussion, if there is any. Yep, Councillor Timera Benfell.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just a comment, I suppose, around the slides. I think perhaps something that might help us in the future is, I suppose, how we label some of our working strategies. For example, I think I saw an aggressive savings regime or something like that. It might be helpful to say something like a proactive savings, something like that. I think I'm just quite mindful of sort of our use of words and how we can sort of play into either a proactive or a positive mindset or a deficit mindset or a negative mindset. So I don't want people to always associate savings with being aggressive or negative or bad. Potentially there are, and we have done a lot of work to ensure that we maintain a good level of service whilst also saving the ratepayer important cost of living pressures as well. So yeah, just a comment on some of our presentations moving forward.
Thank you, appreciate that very much. Any further comments? No. Well, I will just make one as well. I know that through all of the discussions we've had, there's been a really strong desire from all of the councillors to ensure that we can deliver the most affordable outcome possible for our communities. But what has been quite good is I do want to acknowledge that some of the debate between those discussions were how hard do we go in saving costs compared to reducing the levels of service and the things that our community really care about. So I do want to acknowledge other councillors that at times also pulled me up, that actually some of the things we were looking at cutting do mean a lot to our community. And I do know that it's we are very restricted in an annual plan on what we can change, as they are only minor changes to a long-term plan. So as we look to adopt this today, I do really want to signal that the hard work is about to start and how we set our long-term plan and the future of our district over the next 10 years. Do want to also acknowledge our Chief Executive and staff. Finding $6 million of savings is no insignificant feat, and the fact that we started at 10.9% with all of the additional costs such as inflation that we've been dealing with, to go from 10.9% to 6.8%, I think is a fantastic result. So although I know our community is still feeling the pain of a cost of living crisis, we do all remain committed to ensuring that we can deliver the essential services and ensure that we can have a better Rotorua for all. So as the mover and seconded by Councillor Temera Benfell, I now put that to the vote. And this is, sorry, I better read it out, that the Council adopts the Annual Plan 26-27 and notes the plan delivers on decisions made by Council through development of the Annual Plan, that Council adopts the corresponding fees and charges schedule for the 26-27 financial year, and that Council authorise officers to make any minor editorial or design changes prior to finalisation of the Annual Plan document for public release. I put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. I'd now like to invite David back to the table, and we will now go through the setting of the council rates. Can I please have a mover and a seconder for that? That's moved by Councillor Barker, seconded by Councillor Brown, and these are setting council rates for the year 1st of July 2026 to 30th of June 2027. All those in favour to receive this report, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Worship. Look, as Council has now adopted the annual plan for 2026-27, it is now required to pass resolutions to set the rates intended for under the annual plan to deliver on that work program. There's an attachment which is an extract from the annual plan document which sets out the various charges, how they're applied, and the various rates that are intended to be set. The actual rates won't be set until the 1st of July. So, they need to take effect for the next financial year. But these resolutions enable the team to prepare for that and gear up our systems to make sure that we can set those rates on 1 July. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, David. This is fairly straightforward. It's a process matter after adopting the annual plan. Are there any questions? No. Well, I'm happy to move this. Do I have a seconder? That's seconded by Councillor Wang. Just checking if there's any discussion. No, and I do want to note, though, the earlier question around rates rebate and just ensuring that our community are aware that if they do require that financial assistance to come and please speak to our team. So I'll read those out real quick. That Council, in accordance with Section 23 of the Local Government Rating Act 2002, set the rates, and in accordance with Section 24 of the Local Government Rating Act, set the dates by which rates must be paid. In accordance with Sections 57 and 58 of the Local Government Act, set the penalties that may be added to unpaid rates, and also set the discount for early payment at 2%. It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wang. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's also carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. That concludes what's been quite a significant process for our annual plan. Now to share some hopefully great news, I'd like to invite our CCO, Rotorua NZ. Thank you very much for your patience. We have Andrew, Marissa and also Sam. Councillors, we're on page 38 of the first agenda. And can I please have a mover and a second that the quarterly report for Q1 and Q2 be received? That's moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour to receive, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. Hey guys.
Right, well done everyone. Apologies if I'm shivering a little bit. Just while we're waiting for the presentation to come up, first thing is just apologies from my chair, or Rotorua NZ chair, Tim Cossa. He's still recuperating at home, so hopefully he'll be back in when we next report for the third quarter. But we'll take the report as read. It was covering the period from 1 July through to 31 December. We've got a presentation that probably tries to reverse the full 9 months. We'll try and get through it pretty quickly, and obviously leave you guys plenty of time for any questions that you might have over where we're up to. So, without kind of mucking around too much, in terms of our non-financial measures, this is again for that kind of first 2-quarter period, broadly on track across the board. We're seeing good growth in terms of domestic card spend and international card spend, and things are tracking pretty well in terms of the accommodation sector as well. Through there, again, we've seen we're on track in terms of our eyesight performance. Delegate days in terms of the destination education network has been tracking along really well, and again the performance at Sir Howard Morrison has actually been tracking along really nicely. I think we've seen a pretty busy calendar there, and I think Sam will give a little bit more of an update in terms of some of the highlights through that period. The area where we're definitely off track is sort of down at the EEC. There's probably a couple of drivers there. One has certainly been we had a very long shutdown to refurbish the kitchen, which is certainly looking great, and we'll give you a bit more of a view of that when we get into the rest of the report. But it has also been a pretty challenging environment with business events overall. You'll note that Auckland obviously opened a pretty fantastic new facility in the NZICC. We're always mindful that this year was going to be a bit of a tough one, while the business kind of gravitates towards the bright, shiny new thing. But certainly we're in the game thinking about where we perform in terms of 27-28. I won't dwell on those. In terms of financial performance, again, first 6 months of the year, we're sort of tracking along at a reasonable surplus. That's to be expected. We know that from about now onwards, we definitely get into a bit of a quieter season in terms of our trading revenue. What we would note is I think the last quarter probably hasn't been quite as strong as we would have hoped. I think we've definitely started to see a little bit of that, the impact of the various storms that were suffered through, and certainly also the cost of living pressures has certainly impacted a little bit in terms of some of that trading revenue. So that'll probably show up in the next report. Now I'll hand over to Marissa.
E te manukura, tēnā koe, tēnā tātou. So last year we launched a domestic marketing campaign targeting families living in Auckland. In terms of performance, we delivered over 12 million digital impressions and 13,000 landing page visits. In terms of overnight stays, we saw a 3.6% increase in stays compared to previous year, outperforming national decline of 0.5%, which suggests that Rotorua gained some visitor market share, which is really positive for Rotorua. We also saw an increase of 233 hotel rooms during that campaign period compared to the same period 2024, total of 7,000 additional nights. 7% increase in visitor spend during that campaign period. A total of just under 50 mil was spent during the entire campaign. There's a photo of Sam Wallace and his whānau, an influencer group that we brought into Destination as part of the campaign. In November, we launched a co-branded initiative with operators. So we had a really positive uptake by operators. We had 12 on board co-investing into this conversion layer. So the purpose of this phase of the campaign was to drive visitors to operator websites. We achieved just under 4,000 clicks through to operator websites. We've got really strong relationships with media agencies in Auckland, including JCD Premium Out of Home. We delivered an additional 300,000 impressions there, reaching additional 100,000 unique views, so that's added bonus as a result of our partnerships. We partnered with Hamilton Waikato, Bay of Plenty, on a campaign targeting Sydney and Gold Coast visitors. So this was led by Hamilton Waikato, and to leverage the new flights Jetstar started last year. In terms of performance on those digital channels, there's significantly higher achievement above travel industry average across both Meta and TikTok. We don't have any further data at this stage. It's currently in phase 2 of that. Last year we secured 2.5 mil through the Regional Tourism Boost Fund out of central government, so that's a Rotorua NZ-led application and project that we delivered on behalf of the 15 RTOs in the North Island. We're still in phase 2, so our application covered both phases, and partners have all reported really strong results, exceeding the KPIs that were set in phase 1, and we're trending in that same direction for phase 2. One of the highlights there is with THL, one of the partners, sort of reporting that their anticipated length of stay was 10 nights, and they've exceeded that by 12 or more nights. We completed just under 50 FMILs, so that's a combination of TNZ-led media FMIL activity and our own sort of coordinated activity there. Just some of the examples on the screen. So we coordinated with cyclist.com and adventure.com some sort of bespoke marketing media FMIL activity focused on mountain biking and cycling. We've also collaborated with Topor to bring Forbes magazine and Lonely Planet editor into destination. We've just got some of the results out of the Lonely Planet FMIL, and in 10 days the reach has been sort of 1.5 mil, and that's into North America, one of our key markets, so really positive results. And there's a bit of the creative on the screen. That's the adventure.com activity in Australia. Social media has performed really well when we look year on year, and I guess that can be attributed to, research-led approach to our creative and our communication and sort of all that we do. So a significant jump there from 471,000 views, for example, with Facebook up above 11 million. It can also be attributed to the effort that we have and resource we've put into our major domestic marketing activity, Road Trip and Relax Hard. I'm really proud of the work the team has done with the TikTok. So we have engaged Te Aroa Rangatahi Matiaha Hunt, who has, he's at Rotorua Boys. He has, over the last couple of months, been engaged to do a bit of a TikTok takeover, so that's been really, really encouraging and really well supported by operators and the wider visitor economy. We've engaged local photographer Graham Murray to update our destination hero assets. So we're taking very much a seasonal approach. We're working with short-term rental accommodation, Enlist and Airbnb. We were, using some of the accommodation that they look after and featuring in these shoots. So very much a seasonal approach to how we present Rotorua internationally and domestically. So a beautiful image there, top left of Tarawera, a hot pool out at Housegate, the cityscape, the Mokoia at Spring from Skyline, and the buried village down on the bottom left. Last year we underwent a significant back-end infrastructure upgrade of our website, and we've briefed into our developer new wireframe, so that will our website will be significantly different if you jump online later this year. It's been a complex project given the number of channels that we received as a result of events and venues joining Rotorua NZ a year and a half ago. Performance has been strong, so with the upgrade to the back end, removed a lot of bots. What that meant was that page views have come down, but active views have remained steady, so that's positive overall. We've had a significant increase in year-on-year operator referrals to the website, which also shows, the result of investment into domestic marketing activity overall and international. Road Trip 3.0 is currently in market, featuring our Mia Tania Tapsel and the hero operators for this campaign, Hellsgate, Polyspa and On The Point. So real focus on Rotorua as the authority on all the do's and don'ts of a relaxing road trip, and those operators certainly the right choice in terms of how we visualise that. So it's a fully integrated marketing campaign across TVC, out-of-home, radio and digital, and through our own channels, some PR, media and extension through our trade shows and business event activations. So coming up, we're currently focusing on our winter activity that will cover off Matariki with the Te Rā Te Awahi production and more conversion around road trip and a family campaign, but very much focused on how events interacts with our BAU marketing. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about some of our international activity that has now actually since taken place. I'll touch on in a little bit of detail two particularly significant pieces of work. The first being Kiwi North China, which is a roadshow representing North Island operators up into China. Covered 5 cities with 350 frontline agents trained. We also took up a senior manager delegation as well, which was led by Her Worship. Part of this was to unlock some really high-level partnership opportunities across the board up there. So we had some really high-level discussions with China Eastern Airlines, Air China, C-Trip and Newstar. C-Trip, which I'll talk about a little bit more, a conversion partner for us alongside a campaign. We also took up, again, blending in the C-Trip campaign, a Kapahaka group to do some market activation, which is really wildly successful. So we had a activation in front of some culturally significant sites. Again, we were telling the story of the North Island, but we had some really strong representative from Rotorua, and Her Worship also got on Boss Live, which is a massive streaming platform run by C-Trip. I hate to think how many millions of people were logged in at the time, but it definitely got really good coverage. The next piece I'd like to talk about is North America, a roadshow that we joined Tātaki Auckland Unlimited for. So while this one wasn't under the Kiwi North umbrella, we'll touch on Kiwi North a little bit more in a second, it was a joint roadshow with Tātaki Auckland Unlimited, who have done this annual roadshow in conjunction with Destination Queenstown for many, many years, and we were fortunate enough to be invited along to displace our friends down south and turn it into a little bit more of a North Island-oriented proposition. This covered 8 cities, and we had 8 Rotorua operators. We had high-value agents from Southern World and Travel Answers coming along, and it finished with a media event held at the official residence of the New Zealand government up in Brentwood in LA, and we had 30 high-value media attend, including some really high-profile television producers. We had LA Times there, and we had some really good engagement from our operators directly into these media outlets, where we'll get a huge return out of that. Coming up in down the pipe a little bit, we have an India roadshow with General Travel. We have a Kiwi North roadshow with Australia and a Kiwi North event into North America. So these are all coming in July, August and October respectively, and the preparations are underway for those 3 events. Moving into our C-Trip campaign, which is currently still in market. So this campaign at the halfway mark, we're really pleased to say, has fulfilled 84% of the KPI that we were measuring towards for Rotorua. So some of the activity is factored around key buying events. So this is a lot of campaign activity happening through the C-Trip platform around things like Chinese New Year, Golden Week, and Singles Day, which is 11/11. Like I say, we've seen some really good conversion immediately out of that. But part of this as well is also leveraging this campaign to do, as I mentioned before, some of the in-market activity, some out-of-home, but also engaging KOLs, which is essentially the Chinese term for influencer marketing as well. So moving into what is Kiwi North, which might be an unfamiliar term for some. Kiwi North is essentially a collective of 15 North Island RTOs, and we've made the decision to work strategically together to position the North Island offshore and talk about how we show up offshore when we know that a lot of the imagery seen offshore around New Zealand tends to be alpine, South Island, red jet boats, those sorts of things. And what we're really wanting to do, as we know, Queenstown is starting to saturate a little bit in terms of how much capacity they have. We want to try and shift some of that focus to the North Island. And we know, as Rotorua strategically, if people are coming to the North Island, more than likely they'll end up in Rotorua. So it makes a lot of sense for us to work with some of the smaller regions and make sure that we're showing up and selling the North Island proposition together. Initially, this started as a trade-only initiative where we would just sort of work with travel sellers behind the scenes and the consumer wouldn't really see this brand. But as we were fortunate enough to unlock some funding for the campaign activity out of central government, it became really clear that the shift to consumer was needed, as well as also the travel trends changing from being what was traditional trade channels into some more consumer level travels, which are the things like trip.com, booking.com, those sort of online platforms, which consumers are now moving more into that space than some of the traditional channels. And as I alluded to before, with a number of different roadshows, what we're trying to achieve with this collective is allowing other regions to show up offshore and in areas that they probably haven't been able to do before. So we're talking about like Hawke's Bay, for example. How do they get in market to show that the North Island has some really compelling food and wine when that's not necessarily Rotorua's story to tell, but we think it's an important one to try and attract people to New Zealand. Next up, I'm going to talk a little bit about our business events team and the focus there. So really pleased to report that in the 60-day period from our reporting period, we'd converted 3,900 delegate days, which is really good result considering the tough climate that we're in. Andrew alluded to NZICC coming online, which initially was proposed to be exactly that, an international convention centre, but what we've actually seen is a whole bunch of the domestic circuit has really turned up there for the first year as the shiny new toy. We are then also, and I know there was a question earlier around what the fuel impact is on the business event sector, and what we're trying to really understand is how we define our lane, and we think being centrally located, lower cost actually gives us a little bit of a silver lining here where we can proposition ourselves in front of some of these conferences that are potentially feeling some cost pressures and say we are actually a little bit more of an achievable and affordable place to be. Similarly, we also know that the fuel crisis has impacted on flight capacity and availability. So while we're centrally located and easily to drive to, yes, the cost of car petrol is going up, but the capacity of flights have actually decreased. So getting people from the regions to Auckland or Christchurch may be a little bit more difficult. So we'll certainly lean into those USPs that we have and those propositions that we have and make sure that we're taking those really strongly to market. And then similarly, we'll continue to focus on when we do play in the international space, it will be pretty well specifically in the international incentives, which is when you have big incentive groups coming out of particularly the Southeast Asian and Chinese markets, such as Amway incentive groups, which are quite large ones that New Zealand has had before. Moving into the event space, Tarawera Ultra Marathon took place in February and is one of the really significant highlights of the event calendar. 56,000 participants took part in the event itself, and then I think the stat was something like 2.3 people that would come alongside each participant. So town really felt thriving through that entire week leading up to it, and even though the event was impacted by some pretty significant weather, the feeling around town was still really, really strong. And then pleasingly, of those participants, 55% were international, which is actually a really remarkable stat for an event taking place in Rotorua.
Recording in progress.
Oops. Sorry. I hope I didn't break anything. So yeah, moving on to the events that are sort of in progress at the moment. At the time that we put this together, Crankworks was just starting to take place, and so that has now taken place, and we haven't had a full impact report done from that yet, but I do see that they've reported some pleasing stats that they've observed. We also saw Te Aroha Kapaka Regionals move from their traditional home of the Energy Event Centre down to the stadium, which allowed them to significantly grow that event, which is a really pleasing thing for us to see, and also test the capability of Rotorua International Stadium. And then we also in April saw the return of Super Rugby to Rotorua, which was a really, really pleasing thing for us to be part of. It had been 8 years since we'd had an event of that scale for rugby in Rotorua, and whether you were behind the Chiefs or behind Moana Pacifica, it certainly felt like everybody in attendance had a great time. Moving into some of our live entertainment, we have a really strong calendar ahead of us for May Music Month. This is the first time that we've sort of created a marketable moment that we're calling Rotorua Music Month inside of the traditional New Zealand Music Month calendar. I think we have I think it's 9 pieces of content that we have, really diverse stuff. We have a Mother's Day brunch, which is kind of unique. It's a jazz brunch, and we also have a kids disco as well, which is really exciting. On top of that, we also have a couple of international artists and some traditional music happening as well. So if you are into the music scene, please take the time to check out what's on offer down there. Then moving into June, we also have Te Whare Tapiri o Te Aroha launching their new theatrical works, and we've worked really closely with this group. Their pedigree comes from the huge success that they saw out of their previous production, Whiturangi here. The new story, Tera Te Awahi, is the story around the Tarawera eruption, marking the 140th year anniversary. I was fortunate enough to see a script reading of it, and it's an absolutely jaw-dropping theatrical production, and we're really proud to be involved in that and continue to work with them about how we help them share their stories with visitors to Rotorua. And then lastly, we have Matariki taking place in July, and we're continuing to work with Aranui to support them in their aspirations around activating the lakefront with the traditional drone show that they have now become famous for, as well as introducing a whole bunch of new concepts which are yet to be announced, but will hopefully take place in the Sir Howard Morrison Centre as well. So as Andrew alluded to earlier, quite a strong pipe in Sir Howard, and really, really pleased to say that from a full year view, starting with Dracula's all the way back in June and finishing with Te Whare Tapiri, Dracula's back in July and finishing with Te Whare Tapiri in June, we've had that venue thriving for a full 12 months. Thank you.
Back to me. There's just a couple of kind of high-level things that'd be useful to kind of just touch on from an overall tourism perspective. So, you might recall that actually we've been a little bit slow to the party as a country. So, international tourism in particular hasn't returned to pre-COVID levels, but we are starting to get really close. So, pleasingly when we kind of got through to kind of the Jan figures, and I think when the February figures are released, we'll start to look very, very close in terms of hitting that magic kind of 100% number. Of course, subsequently we've had a little bit going on in the Middle East, so we anticipate it's probably going to be a little bit of a decline coming back the other way. But I think certainly the work that everyone's been doing including the Minister of Tourism, has really started to kind of play some benefits in terms of seeing a lift there. Pleasingly here in Rotorua, this is one of the things that we are most pleased around is the performance in terms of the hotel sector. You can kind of see, I think, on that blue line the overall performance for New Zealand, and in the line underneath it, tracking steadily up is Rotorua's performance. So certainly we've been sort of called out in a couple of publications that we've probably seen some of the best growth, sustained growth over quite a long period of time, which is fantastic. And obviously looking forward to seeing the positive impact that comes from that as we start to see, a little bit more, green shoots around reinvestment, but also interest in terms of new investment as well. Looking out ahead, we do try and monitor in terms of what's happening in terms of bookings and so forth for the rest of the year. This sort of looks out about 180 days. I think the thing you sort of want to take away from here is I wouldn't underestimate the impact of some of those events and long holidays. They certainly do drive visitation, and certainly we saw that with Tarawera Ultra, but certainly into some of those other kind of big weekends, we definitely see the visitation spike. Sort of also been sort of starting to go back to our longer term models around, crystal ball gazing. What will we look like out in 2034? And these, when you take the shocks out, do tend to be relatively reliable. So, we're sort of getting back up into that kind of 4.7 million visitor nights, but climbing up towards, I think. I'm sorry, it's really hard to see on there, but climbing up towards close to sort of 6 million visitor nights by 2034. So, I think the future looks bright in this sector. It always is a case of just starting to kind of look through some of the short-term events and take a bit of a long-term view there. Before I dive into the visitor and customer services or customer experience update, there was just one other piece of work that I just wanted to quickly touch on, which is some of the work we've been doing around the inner city. So we've certainly been working with the destination development team really closely. I think we've got a workshop in your diaries coming up, which will be specifically around the inner city, and that's going to bring together about sort of 4 different streams of work. So the blueprint work that we've been beavering away on, we've got some other work around activations, I think incentives, and all of that will start to kind of, inform, I guess, what you want to take out and engage with the community on as you kind of get into your long-term plan cycle. In terms of the visitor services area, certainly we've been pretty pleased in terms of the eyesight performance. We've kind of taken a few, I wouldn't say risks, but we've started to kind of think about, how do we best serve the visitors in that space. You will have noted if you've been down to the Redwoods, we've branched out into wieners, which has been pretty well received. I must admit, Graham and I have got a little bit of a bet going about whether we sell more ice creams or wieners over the course of the year, and I'm hoping I might start to make some inroads as we kind of head into a little bit of cooler weather. The pie bot down at the Redwoods has also received a bit of media coverage and has also been really well received in that environment. So, quite pleasingly, we're definitely kind of lifting our game in that space. If you've been out down to the Redwoods at all, we did spend a little bit of money and just tidy up out the back of the cafe area there, which obviously with the glowworms product down there, it was all looking a bit sad. So we've taken the time just to kind of put a little bit of covered decking in and make sure that actually the customer experience looks a little bit tidier. Up at Tawa, we stepped in to kind of support that. We've taken a view that says we wanted to just protect, obviously, the operation up there as we went through summer. Make sure that actually, people that were kind of utilising that area could actually get a cup of coffee. We're on a I guess the best term would be not a month-to-month, almost a day-to-day. So, if the underlying owners want to proceed with something else up there, we'll certainly walk away. But we've actually been pretty happy in terms of the performance up there with either users of that car park or users of the forest loop, really kind of getting in behind, having some reliable service and coffee. As Sam already touched on, we've had a pretty good run through at the Sir Howard Morrison. I think through this period, one of the highlights was Jimmy Carr. So, it was pretty fascinating. I think we had back-to-back shows in there, and all the fun that comes with one group kind of exiting and another group trying to get in. But the team did an incredible job, and certainly, I think we're getting pretty good feedback in terms of some of the content that's kind of that's now starting to kind of come through there. Touched on the EEC kitchen, so these were kind of the before shots. I don't know if you recall what it used to look like. It probably was a little bit of a depressing kind of environment, but pleased to see it looks a lot brighter and whiter, and certainly I think we've been, everyone's been really happy in terms of how that's sort of come together in terms of a refitted kitchen. The education network has continued to go from strength to strength. I think our only limiting factor there is, just the number of people in that team. So we've had sort of 8,000 packs through in the first kind of half of the financial. I think we're well on track to exceed, the targets in there in terms of 22,000 off the top of my head. And then I thought I'd just sort of touch on what was quite a nice surprise that we had early last week. So Vani, who was one of our customer teams, got a very surprising visit from the minister, the local minister, Todd McLean, who was actually there on behalf of the Prime Minister. And it was a really touching story where Vani had gone above and beyond. I think she'd spotted a lost tourist on the street who was wandering around lost in the rain and couldn't find her hotel. She didn't just kind of point her in the right direction. She kind of popped her in her car and drove her back to the hotel. And that visitor obviously felt the need to write to the Prime Minister. I'll take it, which I think was pretty cool to kind of see, and I think it's reflective of the general attitude of that team in terms of they really do want to do the right thing by anyone that comes through the door. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Andrew, Marissa and Sam. That's been quite a lot to get into the presentation of the past 9 months, but really acknowledge the significant work of yourselves and your team. So we are open for any questions now. We'll start with Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you for your report, and some great reading in there, positive stuff. I do have a few questions. I'll try and be as brief as I can. Touching on the Sir Howard Morrison Centre, first of all, is the shows that were listed, were they all in the Sir Owen Glen Theatre or all spread out?
Off the top of my head, they were spread out, I think.
Yeah, some of them were quite small numbers, Thank you, I just wanted to check that. You talked about the educational travel sector, particularly with the Asian market. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, look, what we are starting to see is some growth, particularly out of some of those Asian markets, in terms of looking to come and do more educational kind of experiences. But that might not be your traditional kind of international student where they're coming down for 12 months. It might be where they're looking to come into destination for a 2, 3, 4 week kind of period. They obviously would love to get into the school for a period of that time, but also get out and about and experience a different culture. So that's the direction of travel in that space.
So for, I guess you could say, future bookings, are we incorporating our new exciting museum in any of the marketing?
Look, I'm sure we will. I think one of the things we kind of learned is you want to make sure you've got your product right before you go and sell it. So I think we'll work pretty closely with the council team around when that's likely to open and what kind of educational program they're looking to put in place. But absolutely, it was certainly a core part of that education network back when the museum was previously open. So we'll look forward to putting it back in there.
And just carrying on that same vein, it mentioned 15,200 students had passed through in the last year, which is really exciting. What numbers of those would have been percentage-wise out-of-towners?
They're pretty much all out-of-towners for us, so we generally focus in terms of out-of-towners as opposed to anything local. Yeah.
And congratulations on already achieving half of what you're aiming for this year. Fantastic. Moving on to another question, Your Worship, it's okay. Also, still with the Sir Howard Morrison Centre, the Montana catering contract that's talked about, and we just saw the new kitchen at the Energy Events Centre, is that spread across all of our venues or just for the EEC?
So they have the primary supplier for EEC, or they've got exclusive rights for the EEC across, and I think also the stadium from memory. In terms of the Sir Howard Morrison, we've got a multi-supplier arrangement. So I think from memory we've obviously got Montana are able to cater out of there, as Plenty Group. Yep.
Excellent, and that's an ongoing thing.
That's an ongoing thing. I think we are, at the moment, we are just looking to work through and think about kind of our future operations in terms of the Sir Howard Morrison. I think we've certainly got no intent to change the multi-supply arrangement, but we just want to make sure that we've understood how we want to fully maximise our own internal operations within Sir Howard Morrison. I think as soon as we've done that, we'll be back into kind of contract renewals and so forth. Yep.
Great. And finally, if I may, Your Worship, just on the events side of things, you went through in the report and talked about what we've done, and there was a great list there. Is there any opportunity for a what's coming and the similar sort of detail? I'm just harking back to many years ago, we used to be able to produce a calendar, a 12-month calendar that businesses could then say, oh, this is coming, that conference is coming, we've got that event coming, and they could plan what they're doing around that. Are we doing something like that?
Yep, we certainly do have, certainly from a public-facing event perspective, we certainly publish all of that stuff out ahead, and we're happy to put that in the reporting as well, if that'd be helpful. I think we've had a couple of goes in the past around the kind of the future conferencing activity, but we'll certainly, I know the team are, now that we've sort of got a full BE team, that's certainly something that we can put on back on them to have a discussion about how they might be able to do that.
Excellent. And last question, if I may, just regarding the economic development side of things. I know there's a serious amount of confidentiality that goes on in these, but is there any way that we can get some sort of direction for particularly our community to see, guess what, this is happening, that's happening, so that they can see some sort of continuity that, hey, Rotorua is moving?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think certainly the work we've been doing around the blueprint, I think we'll give an opportunity to do that around the inner city, and so we'll look forward to sharing that with you, and then getting locked into an announcement around that. I think certainly there's some other, they have been kind of slow burn type things, when I think about the bioeconomy in particular, but I think we're getting close to getting, some positive announcements in that space as well. So, yeah, I think I absolutely hear you on that one. Trust me, it feels very frustrating for us as well at times, but I look forward to be able to kind of come and give you some better news in that space. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We do have a number of questions, so we'll go Brown, Lee, Temera, Wang, Rokawate, Maxwell, and then wrap up.
It's the whole team. Thank you, Your Worship. One of our priorities is renewable energy. This is not tourism related, so I hope this is okay to ask this question. I know the Minister Jones, I think, has got $50 million on the table for geothermal. I'm just wondering what we're doing to leverage that.
Yep, we certainly met with one of the landowners, I think it was last week, who are looking to put an application into that fund, and so certainly we'll be supporting them through that process. So I think that was alongside Invest NZ and the landowners and Kānoa. So certainly there is a desire to kind of think about how do we access some of that funding to get some of those pilot wells drilled. Yeah.
Thank you. Just I know priority one is driving hard for that. They've got a workshop coming up, so they seem to be doing it well. We need to be on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we have teamed up with Taupo in just the recent past with applications for the regional deal to work together, but I do acknowledge that the first 20 million of that fund has been allocated to projects in Rotorua Iti and also Kawerau. So our district is already benefiting, but we hope we will even more in the future. Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you folks for the report. There's a lot in there to be proud of for you and your team, so well done. I do have a bunch of questions, and sort of would appreciate if we could do some rapid fire sort of stuff so we can get through. Great. So I particularly want to focus on destination sales and the Energy Event Centre and Shimpak. So our events and venues team that was previously under the council banner was dismantled in, was it June 2025?
Yes.
So the excellent results that we've got for this very long quarter, from 1st of July to 31st of December, is that really the work of the outgoing team?
Look, it's going to be a bit of a blend of both, will be the answer. Yep.
Okay. What's it looking like going forward for events? Like confirmed conferences in particular?
Yep. So as I sort of said in the initial kind of statement, we knew 26 is going to be a bit of a tough year with all the additional capacity going on, but we've certainly been picking up some short lead, things to fill in gaps, and we're reasonably satisfied in terms of what we've got coming up over the next sort of 9 to 12 months. Yep.
Is the LGNZ conference still going ahead in Rotorua?
Yes.
Okay. Great. And you're not revisiting the multi-catering policy you said before? Are you aware that some of the local operators have formed a collective to assist in the marketing their services? Do you know anything about that?
Not specifically, but I mean, what we do see is, across that sector that businesses do come together to think about how they kind of market their products as smaller groupings periodically. There's some pretty... I was just trying to think of a good one. You could probably point to, very successful marketing alliance between Tapuia and Hopperton and Waitomo, talking about the trilogy. So, that's great. That's a good thing to do. I think anyone who's putting money in to market their own product to the destination is always really helpful.
So you think the conferencing area is in good shape as we look forward, or...?
Look, as I said, I think this is going to be a tough year, and I think, and we're not shying away from that between cost of living. I think, certainly you're finding a lot of business activity has slowed down over the last sort of 3 to 6 months. We're certainly talking to some of our colleagues around the rest of the country. They are noting cancellations, and then when you combine that with additional capacity in the sector, and we should be really clear, domestic conference activity is not a pie that's growing. So, the pie stays the same size, and as you put more kind of capacity in there, you're just carving it up slightly differently. So, certainly that is the landscape we're operating within. We are confident in terms of looking out beyond there, in terms of our ability to secure and win work, and that's certainly where our focus is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And I do know from feedback on both business events and also with the LGNZ conference that Rotorua still remains very competitive in price. So although we are competing with brand new venues in our major cities, it is at times too unaffordable for conferences. So hopefully that continues to encourage people to pick us. So I'll go Councillor Temura, followed by Wayne.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship. I do have a few questions as well, so I hope to keep them short. I'll just start off with a comment. I think it's really positive that we're engaging our rangatahi with some of our media campaigns. I think what they can achieve with a significantly reduced budget, and actually the impact can often be greater, is quite a smart way of working, which is a really great and result, I think, for Rotorua NZ and for the council. My first question is around the website. I've just had a quick look at the NZICC website. Absolutely fantastic, bilingual, and they've really honed in on their uniqueness in terms of being Aotearoa and Māori and all of those wonderful attributes. I heard we're designing a new website. Are we sort of looking to go sort of along those same lines of increasing the bilingualism of the website, our unique offerings in terms of, I don't know who I'm directing the question to, but our unique offerings, I suppose, as Te Arawa and within this rohe, because I did have a quick look through the Rotorua NZ website, and that hasn't quite been nailed at the moment in terms of the bilingualism. Is that something that's on the cards?
Yeah, so that's one of the big challenges with the website is the functionality. So where you might be able to hover over a heading and it flicks over to a bilingual version or translation, we can't do that, but that is the plan. So alongside the rebuilding of the website, we're undertaking a content review and planning that out. You will see across all the other channels that Māori culture and its representation through our channels is just part of our BAU, so it is always on across all of our other digital channels.
Yeah, and I think well, not to be thing, but the NZICC website is a really good something to take inspiration from, because it's all, they have sort of the te reo Māori at the top, English at the bottom, even the navigation is all bilingual as well, and it's quite beautiful to navigate, and they've really honed in terms of the interaction of the website is really, really good. So I think that's definitely something that we can learn from and potentially innovate and offer something unique in that space. So thank you for that. The third question, I'm interested in the conferences as well. You spoke to I think it's the education group, Have we lost any major conferences that were initially going to come because of capacity issues? Not necessarily just because of competition, but have we lost any major conferences or anything like that in recent time just because of capacity? So their, for example, preferred place was Rotorua, but they wanted to bring X amount of people here. Anything like that? Okay, great, excellent. And the fourth question, sorry, Your Worship, through you, is around the economic development side. And so I see you guys, and this is something obviously you guys know we'll be talking about a little bit later on as well. You guys are absolutely nailing the tourism aspects. Do you think Rotorua NZ is well positioned to take on a more significant role on the economic development side, or to put a bit more oomph behind that side and how that connects with tourism?
Yeah, the simple answer is yes. We probably need to take a conversation offline to give you a more, complete answer on that one, because we could probably spend half an hour talking about it. But simple answer is yes.
Yeah, great, awesome, excellent. That's it from me.
Thank you. I think Councillor Wing's questions were answered, so we'll go Councillor Rokolate and then finish with Councillor Maxwell, and then we'll take a short break.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a few brief questions. The kitchen fit-out, has that been complete? Was it completed? I wasn't quite sure, because that was out of action then. The centre was out of action for quite some time, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it's been completed now, so we're back up and running down there now.
Right. So I guess, have we regained the momentum then for events? For conferences and that. I've heard you say, it's a tough time. Well, we all know that. Yeah. But we had a specific events, conference group that were constantly looking at getting conferences in. So I'm just wanting to ensure that, after that, a bit of a lull, there is the momentum.
No, definitely, that's back up and running, and the momentum is there. So I think we're hosting the Dairy Industry Awards, shortly, as an example of the types of things that are going in there. Yeah.
Well, can I just say that I think that does need to be given equal attention to all your other business, because that is what we were known for, and I'd like to think that the focus would still remain. The other question I have is, I wasn't sure if you said that the multi-supplier services or contracts, are they going to be looked at or not? I wasn't sure if you were saying they were, or you're thinking about it, or what's happening there? Is something...
Yeah, look, we're not planning on changing that. I think we've got some agreements, without kind of getting into the details, that have either expired or they're due to expire. All we're wanting to do is ensure that we've really thought through how we want to ensure we look after our own operations, particularly in Sir Howard Morrison. We're mindful that things like the bar service in there, utilising the kitchen are key opportunities around how we generate revenue. So when we re-sign those multi-catering arrangements, we want to make sure that we're not kind of restricting our own use of our own venue, if that makes sense. So, but our intent is certainly not to change the way in which we provide access for more than one caterer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because I do recall some years ago when they were being looked at and reviewed, that caused quite some consternation by the suppliers because of the time and money and that they put into building up their services. So I just would like to think that they would be actually consulted when anything is being planned, and early enough so that they can do their own planning as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And final question from Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've only got 12 questions. I'll only ask one. Well, first of all, a full, thorough report, team. Congratulations. The question I have is, the movie premiere Sergeant Hanemane recently opened, and there was a huge successful commencement there on Sunday night. And actually it's currently getting huge coverage and publicity. This morning on breakfast, the interview was had there with the whānau. The question, the pātai I have are we involved in any way? I know it's just current.
No, not really on that one. Yeah. It's a great film, and certainly the producers and directors should be congratulated. They've done an amazing job, and it's it's fantastic to see that story being brought to life. Yep.
Well, thank you very much. We'll conclude this presentation. We will take a short break though now for 15 minutes. You're welcome to join us for a cuppa if you wish, and we will come back at 11:25 and then go through Rotorua NZ's statement of intent. Thank you.
Yeah. 13 we get this week.
that short break. Okay, we'll get back underway. We are now going to take the statement of intent for Rotorua NZ, and then I do intend that we'll be able to get through the rest of the agenda items quite quickly and take a lot of them as read. But it's my pleasure to welcome Stephanie to overview this report, and I'll ask for a mover and a seconder. Council consideration of 2627 statement of intent for Rotorua NZ be received. That's moved by Councillor Wing, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour to receive the report, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Over to you.
Morena, councillors, your worship. Before we get started, I'd just like to introduce Bonnie. Bonnie is a critical part of our wider destination development team and the author of this report. So the purpose of this report really is for you to consider the staff feedback on the SOI for Rotorua NZ. As you know, Rotorua NZ is our CCO, that is the Economic Development Agency and Regional Tourism Organisation for Rotorua. The SOI sets out the strategic intent, priorities and performance measures for the CCO, and this opportunity is really the way for Council to influence the strategic direction of that organisation for the next 1 to 3 years. The feedback is outlined in the report. It wasn't my intention today to go through all of that. And multiple staff across the organisation have provided input into that. Really, it's just intended to provide greater alignment with legislative requirements, the LTP and Rotorua NZ's broader role as an economic development agency. As you will know, this is not generally my wheelhouse, so we'll do our best to answer all your questions, but I've also asked Sam to sit up here. He's got a lot of experience with respect to SOIs and CCOs, so happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, team. Are there any questions on the statement of intent? And a reminder, these are comments that have been prepared by the staff. They will go to Rotorua NZ for consideration at the board level. Yes, Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks for the report. And I'll start off with an initial question, and then I'm not actually sure if I'm in the right part of the meeting to ask the rest of them, so we'll see how we go. But yeah, I found the report that you've put together really useful. The disappointing thing for me, and which I'd like to see changed in the future, is our ability as councillors to feed into this process, because, you know, although I totally agree with the staff recommendations moving forward in terms of what we write back for the statement of intent, there are certain things in there that I would have liked to have also raised to be able to go back to Rotorua NZ in terms of the statement of intent. So I was just, and this maybe is a question to Andrew and the staff or yourselves around how we could do this in the future to incorporate councillors into this process, so we can go back to Rotorua NZ with a wider, more fulsome approach.
I think I might offer a comment that's tactical and maybe another one that's a bit more strategic. So this is the opportunity to provide that feedback at this stage for this year's SOI. If I step back and think whether there's a more strategic opportunity for councillors to provide input, perhaps in the future we might do a bit more work to prepare a letter of expectation to our CCOs, and if we were doing that in a year when we were not also holding a local government election, then obviously the time frame allows that to happen earlier in the process, and I think I'll work with the team to see how we can incorporate that into a long-term plan process, where obviously the CCOs have a key role in delivering on the long-term plan program. So thank you for the feedback.
Thank you. And as a sort of a supplementary question then, in terms of providing feedback on the statement of intent as it is, I totally agree with, in my opinion, the existing statement of intent is a bit short when it comes to economic development, and there should be stronger KPIs, and so I think the staff has put some in there. I just note that in the current drafting of the statement of intent, priority sector is really inconsistent through the document. So, you know, on page 33, it's tourism and forestry. On page 39, it's tourism, bioeconomy and renewable energy. Then it's later tourism, renewable energy, forestry and bioeconomy. So tightening that up so we actually there's a clear, concise primary sector that we're talking to. There's also how we line this up with our annual plan. The annual plan talks around employment in a range of sectors, yet that's not referenced at all in the statement of intent. So just making sure that, and I'm not even, and this is probably my ignorance as a first-time councillor, I'm not even sure how we got to priority sectors and where they actually originate from. And so we can take that offline and you can provide some information to me on that one. But also, again, like having things in there that go out beyond a year. So, and I think you've spoken to this in your report is, these are the year 1, year 2, year 3 priorities and how that moves into the future. That would be really helpful.
Thank you very much. Councillor Temera Benfell.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship. I wondered, I'll start off with a few comments. Just wanted to absolutely support Councillor Sanford's comments around filling into this. I did find it interesting how we have sort of broken from our trend of having working groups and workshops through some of these sorts of things, and for something as significant as the SOIs and in how we direct or guide our CCOs, I think it's really important. So just wanted to total call on that front. Also agreeing with the points around clearer articulation of RNZ's expanded economic development role. I think there should be, and I think it is somewhere in there, just around greater attention to detail with regards to a particular Māori economic development strategy and how that fits into the wider piece, but also as a standalone kaupapa as well. And I did write some of these comments and then I got further in the paper and I was like, oh, actually, yeah, great, also they're captured there as well. Section 5.3, I do absolutely agree around the customer service part not being as clear as it could be, but also I was interested in how we incorporate customer satisfaction as well. And so I suppose for me the differentiation is customer service is how we are delivering a product, and customer satisfaction is how they're perceiving their value for dollar of that product. So I don't know if that was captured, certainly not from my readings, captured well within the SOI. And finally, and this is my question on the kaupapa section 7.1 under the feedback on suggested additions, there was kōrero, and it's outlined in great, and I agree with everything that's outlined there in terms of Māori and Te Arawa, in terms of the recommendations, I assume, from our Te Amorangi unit and others. But my question was around how can we create a mechanism to have some type of reporting to our Te Arawa Vision Committee? I understand it does outline to Council through the SOI, but I wondered if there was an opportunity, particularly with Māori outcomes throughout that's articulated in the document, if there was an opportunity to create some sort of reporting to the standing committee. I don't know if that's
Might just take that on board as feedback, and then work alongside the chair of both that committee and also Te Tātou Tarawa to find the most appropriate way to do so.
Yeah, that'd be great. Awesome. But the rest, fantastic, but definitely echo the sentiments around would have been nice to have filled in some aspects as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Barker and then Lee.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, team. Just my question is to the performance measures which are mentioned in the appendix on page 56. I think there's a minor typo in there which I can give it to you later. But my question is Māori participation in primary sectors. Definition of primary sector is, or primary sectors.
The feedback with respect to Te Arawa economic aspirations has come from our Te Amorangi unit, so if it's okay, I might just defer to Michelle to respond to that query.
Sorry, could you please repeat your question?
There is a reference in the performance measures to Māori participation in primary sectors, and I just wondered what the primary sectors, which primary sector you were talking about.
Oh, apologies, I don't. Paul put that part in, so I'm not sure where he got to where his thinking was for putting that in. So when he is back, we will come and have a conversation about what that is.
Thank you.
Your Worship, might I have a go at that one? So I think I put this comment and a question in the same basket as Councillor Sanford's in terms of being precise about our definitions and being consistent with our language. So if we're talking about primary sector and it isn't defined elsewhere as to does it include bioeconomy or is it just farming, forestry, etc., we'll pick that up as an action to make sure that we're consistent and clear in the document.
Thank you.
And Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, I take a different view from Councillor Tamara Benfield on the feedback on suggested additions. I just have a question for Andrew, I think, in the first instance. I'm looking at page 63 here, and it says, while no specific assessment has been undertaken, both CCOs operate in a culturally sensitive areas and have responsibilities to reflect Te Tiriti o Waitangi obligations, including enabling meaningful Māori participation in decision-making. Andrew, I was wondering if the organisation was familiar with Hart versus Marlborough District Council, High Court decision last year.
Councillor, I probably can't answer that about that case for the whole organisation, but did you have a question that was leading to?
Yes. This particular phrase here, and it's backed up in the content that I just referred to, suggests that councils have responsibilities to reflect Te Tiriti o Waitangi obligations. That particular court case heard arguments on that particular issue, and the court found that in fact it is the Crown who has certain obligations under the treaty, but it's not councils, and of course it's certainly not a council-controlled organisation. So that being the case, it would tend to undermine the premise of these additional suggestions that have been put in. So available for you to comment on that.
Yeah, Councillor, I'll just provide a comment rather than necessarily an answer. The purpose of the SOI feedback is to indicate Council's direction to the CCO. It's up to the CCO board ultimately then to reflect those comments in their work program for the year ahead. So there's nothing that we can provide in our SOI feedback that will compel the CCO to break the law or do anything that is outside of their mandate as set up by the CCO Constitution and all of the laws and procedures they operate on that under. So I just want to be clear that there's nothing in here that would lead the CCO to do anything illegal. So be comforted by that. I think if I go back to some of the kōrero from Councillor Tamara Benfeld and Councillor Sanford, in a future process, if we were to workshop this before so much pen was put to paper, and perhaps at the letter of expectation stage, potentially there's the opportunity for that letter to be quite focused, and then the CCO to reflect that back in the SOI. I know that GM Sam's got some comments to add as well.
Yeah, just to add a couple of questions to that. So that in the Hart case, the real thing was about council's decision-making powers. So this isn't talking about council decision-making powers at all, but also for CCOs, and we'll see when the CCO appointment and remuneration policy comes up. The Local Government Act specifically has requirements around tikanga and te ao Māori specifically. And so these ultimately reflect those as well. And so the legislation itself has requirements around CCOs, councils considering whether CCOs need to have those in the appointment process, which then flows through to the process in which they operate as well. So that's just a little bit of background in and around that space.
Yes, that'll be coming up later in the agenda, I believe. But I think I'll just note that the Treaty of Waitangi Act Section 4 and the Local Government Act does refer to the Crown's responsibility to take appropriate account of the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, and I think Chris Finlayson actually agreed with me when I asked him that question in the chamber.
Point of order, Your Worship, relevance. We're sort of getting down a rabbit hole now.
Yes, so
I finished.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now take a final question from Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is just one really specific point. The number of submissions written by Rotorua NZ supported to apply for government funding. I was wondering if we could wordsmith that so that the bar's a little bit higher than just writing a submission, but that it's, successful, or, so, I wouldn't necessarily want to, I think we can raise the bar a little bit on that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just based on the feedback, what I propose, if we could just go to point 2, that is point 3. That Council resolved to submit comments on the draft statements of intent for Rotorua NZ Limited as outlined in this report. I've got a different one in front of me in the report. Oh, yeah, sorry. No, it's there. Yeah, so if you just go comments and then bring that other sentence up on the draft statements of intent for Rotorua NZ Limited as outlined in this report and meeting. And council meeting. And so that will just incorporate some of the additional points that have been raised. Thank you. I'm happy to move that. Seconded by Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much, staff, for reviewing that and answering questions. Just checking if there are any comments on this. No, well, we look forward to having those comments presented to the board and hearing any feedback if they have it as well. So I'll now put Councillor Lee.
Just a point of clarification, Madam Chair. Is this going to include the suggested additions, or how does that fit in? I'm a bit confused.
Yes, so the suggested additions as outlined in this report, and then also we'll summarise what's been outlined in the comments today. Bearing in mind that, as has been mentioned, this is feedback that goes to the board for them to consider how they implement that.
So, sorry, I'm still confused. These suggested additions, we're not voting on those, or we are, or...
This is your opportunity now to vote on whether you support the comments that are listed in the report.
Okay.
Yeah. Including some of the comments that have been raised already. And I do also note that we will find time for councillors to draft the letter of expectation following this as well. In future, next time, sorry. Okay. So I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. So we'll now move to the approval of the Rotorua Future Development Joint Committee Terms of Reference and the appointment of an additional council member to that joint committee. This is page 65 of your first agenda. Are you happy to move? Okay, that's moved by Councillor Maxwell, seconded by Deputy Kai Fong. I will just take this as read, Stephanie. It's pretty straightforward. Are there any questions on this? No. So just noting, thank you, Stephanie. Just noting that this is that the Council approved the Rotorua Future Development Joint Committee Terms of Reference, and also that Council appoint Councillor Terika Temara Benfau to the Joint Committee. I'm happy to move, seconded by Councillor Wang. Any discussion? Councillor Temara Benfau?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a small point from me is that I understand that the Bapeni Regional Council has appointed Councillor Tefo as their representative, so I look forward to working with him as well as the other members of the Joint Committee for the future of Rotorua and the impact that this Joint Committee has not only on our community but also on the wider relationship with our Regional Council as well. Kia ora.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Maxwell?
So I was more than happy to move this motion, and I think that Councillor Benville will be a worthy representative of us. There have been some committees of recent times that I've raised and said I think there are times when we do need some of our councillor representation on them, and this is a good example of that. So I was more than pleased to promote this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. We now have one final appointments to other entities. Can I please have a mover and a seconder for the report, appointment of alternative representatives to other entities, and update on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council Public Transport Committee be received? That's moved by Deputy Mayor, also seconded by Councillor Sandford. Again, it's straightforward. I'll take this as read. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, but what we are discussing is that Council note that Councillor Terika Te Mara Benfau has been appointed by the Mayor as alternate to Te Mario Kaituna River Authority, that Council note that Mr Mitch Collins has been appointed by the Mayor as alternate to Tarawera Awa Restoration Strategy Group, and also that Council note that Councillor Greg Brown has been appointed by the Mayor as alternate to the Waikawa Hannahs Bay Reserve Committee. Alternates, their purposes if the representative from Council is not able to attend, then we'll ensure that there's still a Council voice at the table with an alternate. So I am happy to move. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sandford.
Just a point of clarification, could we please take these votes individually? I do have some questions about one of the committees in particular.
Okay, you're welcome to ask your question now, but we will just put them all together if that's okay.
So I am pleased with the information that's being presented to us by staff, detailing the legal framework for the existence of these committees, and I note the relevant section 30A of Schedule 7 talks about a joint committee with other local authority or public bodies. So I have noted the relevant treaty settlement legislation, and they certainly do qualify, given that they're joint committees with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council as other authorities. But I'm confused about the Waikawa Bay Hannahs Bay Reserve Committee. So that is, I just don't follow the legal framework for the existence of or this particular committee. It's been put under the umbrella of an entity, but is it really a council committee or is it other entity? If so, then it doesn't seem to be fitting into the category of being another local authority or a public body.
Kia
ora. Thank you for the question, Councillor Lee. I can speak to that. Waikawa Reserve is a specially classified reserve under the treaty settlement. And as an outcome of that, we were required to do a specific reserve management plan with our iwi partners, Uanukuku Pāko. An outcome, a clear objective and requirement of that reserve management plan was to establish that committee. So it was through the approval of the reserve management plan that the committee was initially established.
So there's no statutory authority for that committee, and so it's established on the basis of a council policy. But how do we appoint to such a committee that doesn't tick the boxes of being a joint committee?
As noted in the report, and thank you very much, Stephanie, for that answer, as noted in the report on that particular committee, page 70, it has a special reserve classification under the Affiliate Te Aroa Iwi and Hapu Claims Settlement Act 2008.
Yes, but that doesn't give rise to the committee being a local authority or a public body.
Councillor, I think I understand the question, and the pathways for these different committees to be established are slightly different from each other. That's a fair assessment. However, they are all rooted in legislation. So, as Steph has answered, the route here is the Affiliate Te Aroa Iwi and Hapu's Claims Settlement Act 2008. That act is the process through which that Special Reserve Management Plan was created, and it's through the authority of that this committee has been established. In some of the other committees, there are more direct requirements directly from the Act and required by the Act in the Act's drafting, but they both are rooted in legislation. So I just want to be clear. I can understand why you've got a question, why this is a little bit differently, should it be grouped differently. In effect, they all come from the root causes legislation, and so we're treating them together as equivalent.
Okay, so that's great, but how do we solve the 30A1 issue of this committee not being a local authority or public body? What is the statutory framework within the LGA?
Councillor Lee, I think you've had this answered not only today, but also we had provided elected members quite a while ago a list of all of the other entities that we have councillor appointments to, and it has further detail on there. We can circulate that again to all councillors for your understanding.
I have reviewed it and I still don't have an answer to the question.
I'm afraid we may not be able to help.
So if we could take the decisions separately, I'd appreciate that, because I would like to support the other two. Or other three.
Okay, we'll put that as myself and Councillor Sanford moved in second 2, 3 and 4. So I now put point 2 forward for Councillor Tirika Temara Benfell for the Kaituna River Authority. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. Point 3, that the Council note that Mr Mitch Collins has been appointed by the Mayor as alternate to the Tarawera Ara Restoration Strategy Group. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's also carried.
Yep. Thank you.
And point 3, that the Council note, point 4, that the Council note Councillor Greg Brown has been appointed to the Waikawa Hannahs Bay Reserve Committee. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That is also carried. And we note Councillor Lee voting against the two. Thank you. And we now go to Council's work programme. This was on page 5 of the late agenda. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder that the report Council's work programme be received. It's moved by Councillor Temara Benfell, seconded by Councillor Wang, and as the other 2 points are just noting, we'll also include that, so that the Council notes the 26-27 work programme and that the long-term plan development will begin in May 2026, that the Council notes the upcoming bylaw and policy reviews, and that the livestock movement bylaw and food safety bylaw have lapsed following reviews of these bylaws. I'll now hand over to Greg to overview this report.
Thank you again, Your Worship, and afternoon, morning, councillors, almost there. So I'm just waiting for Gomathi to bring up a visual representation of the paper that's in front of you today. The item in front of you today, and I appreciate this may be quite difficult to read on the screen, but I'll use it for an indicative purpose in the first instance. That is in your stellar for you to review. This item presents a high-level work programme for the next 12 to 18 months, following the adoption of the annual plan today. So this is an information report. It's not seeking any decisions from you today. Each one of these projects will come to you in its own right, and further decisions will be made in that space. This in front of you today is a governance level overview of what is coming up in the next 12 months. I won't go into each individual project. I will take this report as read from that instance. But what I'm wanting to show you today is what's up on the screen and how each work stream interacts with each other as we go forward. So what you have in front of you today within your Stellan on the screen above is, and I'll see if I can get this to light up. No, I can't, but a little further Further down, about 4 lines from the bottom, is the LTP line. That LTP line is fundamentally, for most of these lines, thank you, Andrew. For most of these lines, the LTP line is the anchor line across which a lot of these projects will interact. And so we have the LTP kicking off in a couple of weeks with your first workshop that is planned. This LTP, as it currently stands, is proving to be one of, or could be one of the most complex that we have delivered so far. For a number of reasons, but one of them is around the waters space and what is happening in that water space and how that interacts from a timing perspective with the long-term plan. So the long-term plan coming up, we have a number of workshops, and that's those blue dots that you see on that screen. So I think we booked in around 15 until November. Now, those are placeholders at this stage, but what we'll have is the interaction of these different work streams coming up into that LTP line. So I'll briefly just touch on the work program that relates to that LTP line. So pretty much every line that's on this, besides the representation review, which is a standalone project, will interact with the LTP in some way, shape or form. Whether it is a budget, whether it's a strategy, or whether it is a way that we are shaping a service delivery going forward. So we have the museum program up there. I won't go into too much detail, but if you have any questions on that, I think Alex will be able to talk about that. But largely, we'll be going into the 2028 opening of the museum. Those budgets and rolling up into an LTP will be critical for the foundation of that service within the LTP. The local water's done well. There will be a decision made by yourselves as to how you progress that going forward. That will drop down into the LTP because fundamentally the long-term plan will have to be delivered based on what you choose, whether that's a water services CCO, whether that's an in-house business unit, or how you see that progress. We will have to deliver 2 long-term plans this year, one that is exclusive of waters and one that is only waters. They will be audited by 2 separate organisations, so we'll have Audit New Zealand auditing our normal long-term plan, I'll call it the normal long-term plan, and we'll have the Commerce Commission auditing the waters side. So we have a water strategy under development at the moment, we have an infrastructure strategy under development at the moment, so we fundamentally have to split those 2 up. That adds to the complexity of how we deliver this. We have a property strategy underway at the moment as well. And that property strategy, a decision will be coming to you early into the new financial year. And that interacts with our long-term plan because of some of the decisions you may want to make around how we progress that property strategy and some of the decisions that might fall out of that. That also interacts with our LTP and levels of service discussions. And so there's a lot of timing complexities within this, and hence the visual representation in front of you with all the dotted lines and how they all drop into that space. We've got the Parks and Active Recreation strategy that's also underway, and you had your first workshop, I think it was last week or a few days ago. And the decision that comes out of that in the next couple of months will roll up into the LTP, and whatever funding may be required will be set into that space. We've also, off the back of the annual plan adoption, we've got a level of service review and fees and associated fees and charges. We are in the process of scoping out that project at the moment, and that will fall into the LTP workshops that you have in front of you. All those blue dots, we will make sure that we have a couple of those, quite a few of those actually, probably around that specific topic. That is a comprehensive piece of work. We aim to finish that by the end of the year. And then we have an ongoing piece around the infrastructure investment for growth, which I know you're all aware of, and that report comes to our infrastructure committee on a quarterly basis. The funding and associated funding for that program rolls up into the long-term plan. The aim of the long-term plan, and I'll focus on that specific project, is to make sure that we have a really firm direction by November, end of November, beginning of December. We will, in order to hit our timelines of the June adoption next year, we will have to consult. We will have to have that audited. We'll have to have both documents audited, our consultation document as well as our proper document that will be adopted. So leading into 2027, that will largely be our audit process and making sure that all of our decisions have been made so that we can create the consultation document and have that audited and all of our underpinning models and supporting documentation is adopted by that stage. I think at this point I will leave it there, other than to show you that it is quite a complex program. It is, everyone has a timing dependency, and so if there's slippage in certain programs, we may cause slippage in others, and that is a very complex piece to manage, with the LTP being the anchor line. What is not up on the board there that is in our report, though, is around some central government reforms. So just wanting to note that there's obviously some moving parts within that space, and we continue to monitor those and make sure that we are across what's happening in that space. And the other piece that is in your report that is not up there is around the policies and bylaw reviews that are underway, and we are constantly working to make sure that we're keeping abreast with central government legislation. I think with that, I'm happy to leave that, Andrew, if you would.
Thank you, Greg. It's certainly a complex piece of work that we're trying to both simplify but also identify the interdependencies of the different work streams. I just want to be clear, this is definitely not an exhaustive list of all the work that's underway, and we'll always be fine-tuning it, but important to receive it at this point. There's some points there, as Greg mentioned, that aren't necessarily on there that councillors might be quite interested in. For example, inner city, we haven't quite mapped out every point on it, and so it hasn't made it up there. There's a lot of work going on in other work streams that we haven't put everyone up here, because as Greg said, he's primarily using this to map out your governance decisions. It's a whole lot of operational work obviously going on in the background, rollout of tools, software, etc., that will all need to happen in order for this LTP process to run smoothly. And as Greg has outlined, is a very, very consequential LTP because of the change in regulatory and legislative environment that we're having to operate in for this time.
Okay, we'll now open for questions, starting with Councillor Patterson and then Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Greg, for your report. Just one little, I don't know if it's an inconsistency, but you stated we'd be looking at the property and facilities assets review early in the new financial year, and yet in the report it says end of 2026. So my question was going to be along the lines of, given that we've been talking about this a lot, perhaps it would be smarter to address that sooner than later, because with all of that work that you and the team have got on your plate, it'd be unfortunate to get to the end of the year and for some reason we might go, no, we disagree, and all of that work would be wasted. So just thinking if we could do it sooner than later.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor, and apologies for the inconsistency. The intention is for this to be brought back in August, September. And so once you have received that, so that's the last sort of quarter of this year, once you receive that, that'll interact with the other work streams. And so our intention is 100% to make sure that this is included in the long-term planning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship, and this might actually be a question to you and Andrew. Are we still exploring the possibility of becoming a unitary authority? Because my understanding would be that if we do explore that, then it's going to have to fit into our governance and decision journey planner.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, as I said, this certainly isn't exhaustive. One of the reasons it's not up there is we've tried to put the work streams up there that we have really good visibility of what all of the steps are. At this stage, following Council's decision, I think on the 25th of March, I was directed to engage with the two regional councils. I have done that work. We've got the next initial steps underway. The most significant at the moment is the Bay of Plenty Regional Council's wish to not progress this work until Cabinet's updated policy decision has been made. Just keeping in mind that the Simplifying Local Government, again, isn't legislation, it's a policy announcement which has been out for consultation. That was expected in April. It hasn't. We're now not expecting it in April, but likely expecting it in the middle of the year. And so we haven't been able to map out all of those steps because we just don't have visibility on it. As I said, a live document, if that comes back and that starts to play significantly into this work program, we will update you. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Thank you very much, Greg, for overviewing that report. Now, did we have a mover and a second for all of those? I'll just double check. Yep. So that was moved by Councillor Te Mata Benfeld, seconded by Councillor Wang. We'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you. We now move to appointment and remuneration of directors for council-controlled organisations. Can we please have a mover and a seconder to receive this? It's moved by Councillor Lee, seconded by Councillor Barker. And I'd like to invite Sam and also Ashton to overview this report. And this is on page 20 of the late agenda in your cellar. Thank you.
Kia ora, and I'm excited to be here all with you in the igloo today. I'm going to speak to the report about the updated policy. When council staff were going through the process of looking at the vacancies for some of these CCO directors, they realized that there was a statutory gap between what our policy was on the appointment and remuneration versus the Local Government Act. And that initiated a review very quickly to pull through a new updated policy that both encompassed all the legislative requirements and reduced some of our risk, and additionally incorporate best practice. As part of this best practice review, staff undertook a comparative policy analysis and also started to look at some of these other elements within our district that might be relevant. As a result, we've made the new policy, and otherwise I'll take the report as read.
Probably just to add to that is we appreciate that this is being done in a tight time frame because we want to get some appointment rounds going for our CCOs, and so the review date, as you might see on the on it, is quite short, so that we can review it in a couple of years' time, so that there'll probably be a more extensive ability to talk to all of you about it, but as well as our CCOs. But at the moment, we followed best practice as well as what we're doing and merge those together, but as was said by Ash, I'm happy to take questions on that.
Thank you. I'll open up for questions. Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Sanford. Okay, that's been moved by Deputy Mayor. We'll carry on with questions. Councillor Sanford.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for all the information. I just had a question around and I'm sorry I can't find it in my stellar documents at the moment, around the airport constitution in comparison to the policy, and it seems to be inconsistent between who can be appointed as a director for both the CCOs, because the new policy allows for elected members to be appointed, but the existing constitutions don't allow that. So I was just wondering if that can be clarified, if the constitutions are going to be changed, and I have a follow-up question on that.
Yeah, so the constitutions, I guess, overrule this, for want of a better term, so they can't be in breach of their constitutions, and so the wording that we're careful to do is may be appointed to it, and so it envisages that if the CCOs change their constitutions, that would enable that to happen, but because they haven't, we can't force something on the CCOs that their constitution doesn't necessarily allow. And so I imagine that would be, if council were to move toward wanting that, there would be a discussion that the councillors would have at a governance level with those boards about altering their constitutions to enable the appointment of councillors. But it's, I suppose, drafted broad enough to enable that as a potential possibility, so that we didn't feel that we were constricting council's decision-making powers.
And I'll add on to that, Sam. And we realized when we were developing this policy that there might be some inconsistencies. So there's a specific clause within the policy that this policy cannot direct or influence or change the Constitution, that we're going to use our appropriate channels to influence to make sure that there is alignment in the future.
One supplementary question. Thanks for clarifying that. And I just note, having looked through the airport constitution and their ability to have alternative directors, that that might be a good discussion in the future as well.
Yeah, and I think that's probably not a question that necessarily needs to be answered, but I think that is an opportunity too. And from the AOG advice on that is that that's probably the preferred model of the Office of the Auditor General, is that if councillors are to be part of it, it's more in that observer role based on the difficulties of discharging your obligations under the Companies Act, of acting in the best interests of the company while you're also acting in your interests as a councillor. And so, that's something that I'm sure council can explore if they wanted to do that.
Thank you. And Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm fascinated by the paragraph about tikanga Maori in here. I'll read it out. The 2006 version introduces requirements around tikanga Māori competency throughout, including a board composition mandate that at least one director on each CCO board holds demonstrated tikanga Māori competency relevant to Rotorua, and a requirement to consult with an appropriate tikanga Māori advisor when determining competency needs. How do you determine whether somebody is competent with tikanga?
Yeah, so that's the exact point of having that tikanga expert. So I also agree it's a difficult concept for lots of people to have, and so that's why we have in the policy suggested that we need a tikanga expert to understand that, to discharge our obligations under the legislation. Just like, and that can be our in-house, it doesn't necessarily need to be external, but just like if, for example, we were appointing to the airport board, I imagine that probably councillors would like to hear from those that have run airports to understand if the expertise required were able to meet that, or the same as if you're appointing a finance person, you'll probably talk to people in the finance sector to understand if that person does actually have the requisite skills, rather than them being, I don't know, a snake oil salesman and can convince you all that they're the best person at finance, but they don't actually know anything about it.
So this is going to be quite subjective.
To your point, Councillor Lee, as part of the skill matrix in the policy, we outline some areas where tikanga may be relevant, and some of the skills within there, like co-governance or engagement or understanding Maori business models that might fulfill the statutory requirements under the Local Government Act.
Yes, to your point, it is subjective because ultimately all appointments to boards or anything like that, or employing people, is ultimately quite subjective, but just like it'll be subjective about whether they have the requisite governance or legal or financial skills. I guess all of those are ultimately quite subjective measures when you're looking at board appointments.
But if a candidate didn't have relevant tikanga experience or competency, that would be that would exclude them from the role?
Not necessarily. It's a consideration they have to take into account, but I think, and the reason that this was put in place is about 2 years ago, Auckland Council case when they appointed to the chair of water care, and so they didn't take into account this section of the Local Government Act, and the court then found that that appointment was illegal, and so they had to go through the appointment process again, and I think that cost them about $600,000 in legal fees. So I guess the point of this is that we don't incur that type of legal cost for our council.
Thank you.
And we do acknowledge that this new process is aligned with best practice as well. We'll take a final question from Councillor Temara Benfell, and then I'll put this to the vote.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you guys for a very thorough report. On the other side of Councillor Lee's question regarding tikanga Māori, I was wondering how and if we can incorporate, or if it is already around te reo. I just felt perhaps tikanga was missing its mate in te reo, and so I wonder if or how we can incorporate that as a key competency. But I do note particularly for tikanga Māori, it is well, obviously you've thought that out quite well and provided relevant case law and policy. But yeah, is there a mechanism available for us to create it as a key competency?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and thanks for the praise on that. It's probably not even Ashton or I that was involved in that, but the Te Aomarangi unit spent a lot of time working on that, and that's the benefit of them. But for the Te Reo, I think the focus is in that skill sets matrix, so it ensures that on a probably case by case, CCO by CCO basis, that we consider the level needed in that CCO. Just like we're considering other skill sets like finance or legal or communications or anything like that. So I think that would probably be the mechanism. So council ultimately has a say in setting what that skills matrix is. And so, yeah, I guess I would encourage you, if that's important as part of that, that's added to those skill matrix.
And what's the mechanism for us to be able to do that? Is it to bring it to the working group, or is it to bring it to one of our policies?
So it's more informal than that. So it'll go via the mayor, and so it will come to councillors to seek feedback on what councillors think the skills matrix for those boards should be.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wang is happy to second this, but I will just note before I put this to the vote that actually this is, the airport in particular is a significant site for both Ngāti Oraka Kōpako and Te Roro Te Rangi, and it is very relevant that we ensure that we're respectful and appoint directors that not only understand the history of that site of our Rotorua Airport being taken under the Public Works Act and families forcibly removed, but ensure that we have the competencies within our CCOs to be able to not only deal constructively but also to work in partnership with those families and also hapu who still have a strong connection to that site, and we wish to help to build that. So thank you very much for answering those questions quite comprehensively. I'll now put this to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against? That's carried.
I'll abstain, thanks, if that could be recorded.
We note one abstention. And we now move to the financial update. I'd like to invite David. This is page 31 of the late agenda, that the report Financial Update March 2026 be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour to receive, please say aye.
Aye.
And David and Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wait for the presentation to be loaded. This presentation covers the period to the end of March 2026, that should be 2026, being the first 3 quarters of the financial year. A lot of the themes in this report have been covered in previous meetings, but I will dwell on a couple. You'll see in the bottom right-hand corner that debt and cash are significantly higher than they have been in previous months. We repaid $76 million of debt through April, and so both the borrowings and cash amounts have reduced respectively since the report was published at the end of March. You'll see again that the capital expenditure is significantly underspent, and I will probably touch a little more on that in this presentation. At the end of March, Council had an operating surplus of $3.9 million, and after taking away the impact of the lower capital subsidies and the lower development contributions, and as in previous months, that's mainly driven by the increased rate money from the Tarawera lump sum and the reduced interest as our debt is lower than we had forecast in the annual plan. Similar themes through our P&L, but I would like to draw your attention to one aspect that is emerging in our transport activities. You'll see in the income section for subsidies and grants operational that we have a positive variance of $737,000. That is money we receive from NZTA Waka Kotahi, especially to do with emergency works, and when you look at the storm damage over the 9 months to the end of March, we've received $737,000 more because we have had to spend more in the operating expenses on our roading network. So we receive a 50% subsidy from NZTA Whakakatahi. So if you do the maths, we've received 737,000 extra from NZTA because we've had to spend double that on storm damage. At the end of March, we've spent about just under $70 million of the capital program. The full year program is $160 million. I would like to just mention this in the context of having adopted the annual plan and loading up for the upcoming long-term plan. If we look at Council over the last 10 years, 10 years ago, a full year program of $50 million used to be a lot. This year we're dealing with a program of $160 million. When we're gearing up for the next long-term plan, we've been able to grow that program on the back of strong revenue growth. Remember, we can have debt that is 2.5 times our revenue. If the appetite for revenue increases through the long-term plan is smaller, we'll be able to afford much lower debt numbers, and we will have to start bringing that total capital program significantly narrowing that number to be able to keep within our debt headrooms, and that is an issue we will be raising through the long-term plan. If we look at where we are at the end of March, the predominant reason we are underspent is through the IIG, and noting that we're still working with NIF on getting that signed off, that variation signed off. It still isn't entirely finalised with NIF, and we still really haven't got going on the capital program for IIG. So within the 70 million we have spent, there's a breakdown included in the presentation. The areas where that spending has occurred, predominantly the spaces and places and sewerage activities are the main drivers where that capital money has been spent. But I'm happy to take questions on the report or the presentation.
Thank you very much, David. Any questions? Councillor Temara Benka.
Kia ora, thank you, through you, Your Worship. Just a simple question from me, David. There seems to be a drop in the fee and charge collections. Can you just outline what's driving that? That's not to do with the Tarawera. No, that's separate, eh? Yeah, so there's quite a significant drop there.
Through the Chair, we, within our fees and charges revenue, we have had in line with previous years, lower collection in our parking activity. So parking remains a challenge, and we were hopeful that the new upcoming change in the parking activity will improve that situation. That also includes areas in the regulatory areas such as animal control, where there is a long-standing challenge in full compliance with some of those regulatory areas.
Just a secondary question. So you did outline, and you have outlined in previous meetings as well, around our capital expenditure and how that's being there's a barrier there with some of those grants and subsidies. Are there any secondary driving factors that we should be aware of outside of that are sort of impacting negatively on how much we're expending through our capital expenditure? Was it primarily those grants?
Through the Chair, look, the reason we haven't received the grants is because we haven't spent the money. We always receive the grant money in arrears, so there's a connection there between the lower spend on IAG and the lower capital subsidy. Those kind of net off. In other areas, we're aware of some spend that will still happen, but will happen after the end of the financial year. So we're working through what's realistic to carry forward and what's going to be necessary to rationalise.
Councillor, if I can just add to that, through you, Your Worship, and you will become very familiar with this through the long-term plan process that you're about to embark on. But effectively, when you set your capital budget, you're doing two things that are quite different from each other at the same time. One is setting budgets, and the other is planning delivery. And typically, budgets are set far in advance of the actual delivery planning, because if you set a budget for year 3 or year 4, you're likely going to be quite far off having a very clear delivery plan for that work. As you get closer to that year, and year 3 becomes the year in front of us, often the work done to design the culvert or prioritise which bridges need replacing, or which playgrounds need to be renewed, all of that it comes into sharp focus. And almost certainly what you actually need to do is different from what you thought you would need to do 3 years ago, or certainly 5 or 6 years ago. And so, as David has outlined, and it's a challenge that all councils face, is you forecast a budget, but very often you won't have the specific delivery plan for that budget. And in some ways, it's really important that we don't just spend, well, in many ways, it's really important that we don't just spend money because the budget's there. And so what we've tried to do is be really precise about forecasting. Yes, there's a budget there, but actually what are the other success factors for that project? Is it correctly scoped? Have we got the right permissions? Have we consulted the community? Have we got our iwi partners on board? And so we de-risk that work rather than rushing forward and trying to do work because it's budgeted in a particular year. Now, I think that's a much more prudent approach to capital expenditure of public funds, but what it translates into is it looks like actually we're delivering way less of our capital project than we planned to. That's not correct. What we have done is delivered way less of our capital project than was budgeted, but I think what we're doing is delivering the right level of capital investment based on a delivery and all of those other factors I outlined. So I guess just as we get closer into the long-term plan, we'll see numbers appear in years. That's going to be our best guess from a budgeting point of view, but when our delivery team goes into it, they're going to go, well, actually, there's a whole lot of other work that needs to be done. We won't be able to do that for every project over 10 years, and that's why we start to get this mismatch between the two. But I think that the only way to resolve it is every year, every quarter, reforecast, recalculate, and part of the savings we delivered in this year's annual plan is around reforecasting that 160 million down to 100 million, which is actually going to be challenging to deliver anyway. Sorry, long response, but I think it needed to provide that context of the difference between budgeting and delivery planning.
Okay, thank you. And we'll take our final question from Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, for your indulgence. Thank you, Michelle and David. You may have touched on this at the beginning of the meeting today, and I'm going to ask again. We're talking about not spending budget. Just because it's there, we're not going to spend it. What happens if our contractor costs and supplier costs go through the roof, which is not their fault? Will our major capital projects be impacted to the point where we have to start dipping into those funds that we've budgeted for just to carry on doing what we're doing now?
Councillor, I might answer that. So every project's different, and every project has a different level of ability for costs to increase. So obviously when you're at the start of a project and the scope's very undefined, you can make choices that influence its outcome significantly. Once you pass into the delivery phase and you've contracted a project, there are much more limited means by which that cost can escalate, mechanisms under the contract, etc. So what we're doing, and as this is the work that I outlined that we're doing, we're looking at all of the contracts where we've got exposure and trying to understand what that means for each project. Typically on a capital project, which I assume we're talking about capital projects here, typically in the capital project we've got a delivery contingency for exactly these sort of eventualities. If we have external shocks like what we're experiencing, those delivery contingencies are often insufficient. But that's the work that we're doing now to understand where we're at risk. And we'll bring those back to you through those projects. And then if we see a program level view, that'll come back to council.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on now. Thank you very much. I'll Just check we didn't have anything to move. No, we'd already done that. Okay, so we will now move into public excluded section. I will advise that there are 5 items for consideration. We have 2 confidential minutes. Andrew, if you want, we'll go straight. Andrew Wilson? Sorry, we'll bring your one forward. That's the Mountain Bike Events Limited Crankworks and underwrite agreement, and then we also have board appointments and Rotorua Regional Airport funding. Our reason for passing this resolution to go into public excluded is under section 7.2, and grounds for passing this resolution is section 48.1, and I'll just take all of those as read. So I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder to move into confidential? It's seconded by Councillor Sanford. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. We'll just give a minute to turn off live stream and shut the doors. While we're doing that, though, I'm happy to take